What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the week 2 edition of my cash tiers video. The purpose of this series is basically on a weekly basis. Thursdays we're going to go through, analyze players in terms of their viability for cash. One thing I do want to make clear that I think some people were a little bit confused about last week. These are not raw point projections. So Mahomes, he's not going to be in my top tier almost ever, despite having the highest point projection on any given slate, because these tiers, they take things into account like price, and you can't pay up for a quarterback in cash most of the time. So most of the time the high price guys are going to be a little lower despite having higher raw point projections. So that's one thing I do want to make clear at the top of this video, and we'll go starting with quarterback here in a second. You guys can follow me on Twitter if you like this type of content at Ben Hauver, BenHauver, and Sunday mornings I post an exclusive adjustment to this video where I will go through and post all of my updated tiers with the information that we get in between Thursday afternoon when this is recorded and Sunday morning. So make sure you follow me there if you want to see an adjusted version of this at about 10:30 a.m. right before the games kick off. That's Eastern time, so it gives you about 2 hours to digest that. But yeah, let's move on real quick, get into these quarterbacks. So right off the top, I got two guys in my top tier this week, Big Ben and Jared Goff. Starting with Ben, I think that he is in a massive bounce back spot. The Steelers have a 25.25 point total, and they are hosting a terrible Seattle team that surrendered over 400 yards to Andy Dalton through the air last week, excuse me. So yeah, I really do think that Big Ben is going to bounce back after getting embarrassed in prime time, and we know his home road splits are significant. So at 5,800, I think he's underpriced for the upside he offers, and I would really not expect a floor game from him in this spot. I feel pretty good about Big Ben. That being said, it's really dependent on Juju's health, because without Juju, I think this team is kind of talent deficient on offense, which is weird to say about the Steelers, but it's true. That being said, it looks like Juju's going to play, so they kind of go hand in hand to me. Juju's going to be a priority throughout the week, so I would like to stack them potentially in cash. Stacking's not necessary, but it gives you a higher ceiling to win maybe all of your head-to-heads versus some of them. So I do like the idea of Big Ben and Juju in cash, and we'll just see how that plays out in terms of Juju's toe. The other player in my top tier here for cash is Jared Goff at 5,900. I think that he is also underpriced for the potential upside he offers. I think it's interesting that the Rams are favored here. I mean, I think that it's probably just because they're at home, but I kind of think Saints +3 would be a good bet. I expect Goff to be passing quite a bit in this game. As we saw, this isn't really a team that's going to be heavily reliant on just running Todd Gurley 30 times a game, 25 times a game anymore. I mean, Malcolm Brown still was very successful in the role that he had. So, I mean, I guess we'll really see how that sort of plays out. But in terms of Jared Goff, I mean, he's got 3 solid pass catchers. Kupp looked all right. He's getting a ton of targets, and I think that, he'll just look better and better as the year progresses. Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, that sort of speaks for itself. So, anytime you have access to a game like that going against the Saints, in your building, you gotta look at that spot, especially at 5,900. So Patrick Mahomes at 7,500 probably has the highest raw point projection on the slate, or at least at quarterback. But at 7,500, I just don't really know that I can go there in cash. That being said, I would never blame you for taking those safe points. I'm pretty sure Mahomes had 300 yards passing by the half. So when you can basically lock that bonus down, and your almost floor is 2 passing touchdowns with a realistic range of 4 or 5. You can't not like a player like that in cash, but it's just really hard for me to get up there this week. That being said, if I'm going to pay up, I think I would rather go up to Mahomes than stop at Lamar Jackson or Deshaun Watson, which is why I've got him in a tier above Lamar Jackson. And, speaking of Lamar Jackson, he absolutely obliterated the Dolphins last week. So I've got him in cash consideration as well. We saw him have a very, very productive game, and he did so without rushing. Only 3 rushing attempts for 6 yards. So it's tough to not like Lamar Jackson. We've seen now that he has a passing floor as well. I mean, a passing ceiling at least. We don't know what the passing floor is. It's probably still very low. I don't want to overrate week 1. But that being said, I mean, I think if he were to have a passing floor game, I think that he would balance it out with rushing. I think that Lamar Jackson, all in all, is a very safe quarterback. That being said, I have him in tier 4 because if if I am going to be paying up, I think I would rather just go all the way up to Mahomes. Moving to this last tier of guys that I'm considering for cash, we've got Tom Brady and Josh Allen. I'll talk about Brady first. To me, this is just about a team scoring thing. I mean, you have to consider the guy who's 6,400 with the highest point total. On the slate implied at 33.5. A lot of this comes down to like what we just talked about. The Dolphins defense is absolutely horrific. Half the team wanted to be traded after their embarrassing loss to the Ravens last week. So, Brady is in consideration, but at 6,400, I mean, only 300 less than Lamar Jackson. I don't know if I could make it there, especially when we saw, Brady put up 25 points in a beatdown with the Steelers in primetime. I want 30-point upside from my quarterback, and I really don't think the Dolphins have any chance of, competing really in this game. I think that once we get to the fourth quarter, it's going to be the Sony Michel show, maybe even a little bit earlier. I mean, this team could literally have, 30 points by the half. That would not be surprising. It's just where the touchdown's going to come from with Brady. They could have 4 rushing touchdowns in a game, and that would not surprise me. So, he's in consideration because I really do think the Patriots are going to smash on offense, and he'll probably have quite a bit of that touchdown, but, touchdown equity. But, yeah, I don't know. And in this last tier, Josh Allen is a guy that I'm, really starting to consider more and more. I would not be shocked if I ended there at the end of the week. I mean, it's risky, right? It's kind of like Jameis Winston. I didn't really want to play Jameis in cash last week. I didn't. I ended up going with Carson Wentz. But, Jameis Winston, I think he's a bad quarterback. And it's hard to play a guy like that in cash because, you have the potential of just your badness coming out and ruining the game. So, Josh Allen had a bad game last week. I don't know if he's a bad quarterback or not. I mean, certainly he's a very physical quarterback, and he's a good fantasy quarterback, and that's really what matters. So, I do consider the chance of him having another bad game. Maybe, I don't think he would get benched, but I mean, he did have 4 turnovers in his week 1 debut against the Jets. So, I really don't know what to think about Josh Allen. That being said, in a game that he had 4 turnovers and did not look good whatsoever, he still put up almost 20 points on DraftKings. He had 10 rushing attempts, so I think that he's going to have a solid rushing floor. And, John Brown is one of my favorite plays. This Giants secondary got absolutely torched by Dak Prescott, and, deep passing is kind of Josh Allen's thing since he doesn't really have much intermediate accuracy. But I do think that Josh Allen is in consideration. His rushing floor just kind of puts him there for me. So I think, he's in consideration. And I think that if you do go down there, he's not the safest play on the board, but I think that he frees up a lot of space. So that is something to keep in mind. Would not be shocked to see him rise in my tiers by the end of the week. Moving on to running back here, my top tier is consisting of one guy, and that is Alvin Kamara, 8,200. He started off against the Texans last week, had 13 rushing attempts, 97 yards, just missed that 100-yard bonus. Also 8 targets for 7 receptions, 72 yards. No touchdowns, still put up 23.9 points, and we know he's one of the most dangerous red zone weapons in the NFL. This is going to be another high-scoring game on the road. I think Breeze is going to look to Kamara quite a bit, and I just think that Alvin Kamara's floor ceiling combo is one of the highest in the league. I think Saquon Barkley's right up there, but as you see, he's in my third tier, 9,200. I think that $1,000 difference makes a huge difference this week. It really does. This isn't like last week where price was, very wishy-washy. You could really just fit whoever you wanted. This week, we're actually kind of starved for value outside of a couple guys. So Alvin Kamara to me is going to be the pay up option to target. I'm waiting to see what his, projected ownership will be, although it doesn't really matter for me in cash. I don't think that you need to be afraid of him. I'd be shocked to see him go above like 50, 60%. Kind of like Dalvin Cook last week, this one's sort of a no-brainer. You just lock it in and then go from there. I am going to be starting my cash lineup with Alvin Kamara. If I'm starting my lineups with Alvin Kamara, I think I'll be following it right up with this next guy, Austin Eckler, 6,100. He got priced up 600, compared to last week, but he just dominated touches. He dominated the touches over Justin Jackson, and his role in the pass game, very secure, and I think that it's going to rise. He was second on the team in targets, and now they are without Hunter Henry for a couple of weeks. Mike Williams looking doubtful with a knee injury. We'll see, if he comes back. I think if he comes back, that might even be a boost for Eckler. Less players on the Lions defense keying in on him. But, we saw, just last week, despite the Lions having a great offensive front, David Johnson was able to be successful, especially in the pass game against this team. I'm expecting Austin Eckler to be very highly owned, but I am not afraid to play him whatsoever. I think that Eckler is a smash play. And it's really just a matter of finding your third running back, because I think that these two kind of plug themselves right into your cash lineup. I don't see why you would really go anywhere else. I mean, Austin Eckler was second on the team in targets, like I said, and that was that was with Henry and Williams, and, that's only going to go up. So Austin Eckler, 6,100, got priced up, but not priced up high enough. Saquon Barkley, briefly touched on it. He has a huge floor. What is there really to say? It's just, 9,200. I don't think I can get there this week. I don't think that there is enough salary unless something opens up late. I just don't really think that I can get up to Barkley. That being said, if you prefer Barkley and you have an extra, 1,000 that you want to spend, you're not crazy about Kamara, I'm not going to fault you for that. Barkley 9,200, squarely in play. One of the higher floor ceiling combos of any player, right there with Alvin Kamara. Now, this next tier I think is really interesting. Gio Bernard, 5,300, Matt Breida, 5,200, and these are two running backs in the same game. Gio Bernard, if Joe Mixon misses, I think will have a higher percentage of his team's usage. So I think that if Mixon were to miss, I would probably lean Gio, but that's really up in the air still as of Thursday morning. So I think that Breida is viable in cash. He was the starting running back basically last week. Now Coleman is gone. It's just him and Raheem Mostert. They also have Jeff Wilson Jr. activated. And the thing about Jeff Wilson Jr. is that he is a good pass catcher. I don't think that he'll eat into Breida's touches, and Breida could easily, touch the ball 20 times in this spot, especially against a bad Bengals team. We just saw what Chris Carson did to them last week. But that being said, Breida is a guy who frequently misses time during games. He'll be injured. He'll come back in. He'll come back in better than some of these other guys. They get injured and they're gone. But, Breida still, he misses time. He does. That's one thing that you'll know if you follow Matt Breida as a player. And, at 5,200, I do think he is in play as a starting running back. That being said, on the road, I don't know. Gio Bernard, I think, would be my preference if Mixon were to miss. And I think that, you're going to be looking in this range. If you go Kamara and Eckler and then you plug in a couple of the wide receivers that I think are good choices, this is the range that you'll be looking in. James White is in the tier right below it, but the same price range, 5,100. Earlier in the week, like my first look on Tuesday, I thought James White would be a stone lock. But that being said, I don't know. It's kind of like the Brady thing. It's like, is this going to be the Sony Michel show and Rex Burkhead just crushing the second half of the game? Will James White, Julian Edelman just sort of rest up? Because, the Patriots really aren't going to need to pass. I do think that James White is a pretty safe bet to get around 15 points. So if you're just looking for that 3X with not much more of a ceiling, then I think that White is squarely in play. But he's just a tier below these guys like Gio and Matt Breida, who I don't think have quite as much danger of getting vultured by guys like Michel and Burkhead. Gio, especially if Mixon misses, will be a 3-down back with goal line work. So there's that. And, the rest of the guys in this James White tier that I'm looking at, James Conner, Mark Ingram, and even Chris Thompson down at 3,900, the cheapest guy that I'm considering, mostly just because he had 10 targets last week and should, again, be behind. Expecting the Redskins will be behind in most of their games, but although Thompson's floor is good for his price, I don't really think that he has much of a ceiling, and, ceiling is important in cash games, contrary to what some people may think. Ingram and Connor, two guys I'm considering. I love the spot they're in. I already talked about the Steelers spot. I think Connor is going to bounce back. He did not have a good game, but, the Steelers were playing from behind the whole time. I don't think that'll be the case. He still played on 80% of the snaps, really out-touching Jalen Samuels and out-snapping him in every way. So I do think that Connor has a chance to bounce back for sure, but that might be more of a GPP play. I could definitely see myself Xing him off this list come Sunday morning. Mark Ingram, great spot. He is dealing with an injury, so we'll see how that comes out. But, he only had 14 touches, in a game that the Ravens had squarely in hand. I think the Cardinals will give him a little bit more trouble, but I'm still expecting, like I said with Lamar Jackson, a higher number of plays by any team basically playing the Cardinals. So, could Ingram touch touch the ball 20 times this week? I think absolutely. But we just need to monitor his injury. 6K, he's in play, but squarely behind Austin Eckler for me. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to fit Kamara, Eckler, and a 6K running back. So that's the main thing as to why Ingram is so low in this list. Now, let's move on to wide receiver here. My wide receiver top tier, Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, two guys that faced off in prime time Monday night in that great game. And they really put it on display as to why these guys are top tier. I mean, starting with DeAndre Hopkins, right? He had 13 targets, 8 receptions, over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was completely dominant over Latimer. And Michael Thomas also. Just a dominant performance. Also 13 targets, had 10 receptions, over 100 yards. Didn't get the touchdowns, but still 25 points on DK, and now he's going against this Rams team in a potential shootout. For me, I think that you can only play one of Michael Thomas or Alvin Kamara, and they're equally pretty decent plays, and that goes for Hopkins too. I do think I like Thomas slightly more than Hopkins this week with QD returning and just this tough Jacksonville matchup. Even though, Hopkins is largely matchup proof, I think that Thomas will be in a better scoring environment, no doubt about it. So, you can plug either of these guys into your lineup, but I think that, like I said, we're somewhat starved for value this week. So I think when it comes to wide receivers, paying down might be the move, just so you can fit in guys like, Kamara and Eckler and, maybe some of these tight ends that we're going to discuss as well. If you can fit Thomas, though, he's a great play this week. Absolutely. Now, the guy in my next tier, Tyrell Williams, 4,400. I think that he is a lock just because of the value he provides. Had a good game in his first action, with the Raiders, serving as their number one receiver, had 7 targets for 6 receptions, over 100 yards and a touchdown. And now he's going to be in a much heavier pass game script. He managed to do this with, maintaining a lead for most of the game, as the Raiders did. Now he's going to be going against KC. And, he's just underpriced. I think that it's because he played on Monday night, so the prices came out before the game was played, before we saw what Williams' role was going to be. I think you can lock in Tyrell Williams at 4,400. He's the safest low-dollar play on the board. Expect him to be massive chalk as well. So there's little downside as well, because if he busts, everybody busts. So, I think Tyrell Williams is one of the key plays that we need to fit in. My next tier here is the guys just below Michael Thomas and DeAndre Hopkins. Theoretically, I could see if you want to sacrifice playing these guys to get up to that tier, especially Thomas. But, Juju Smith-Schuster, I'm betting the house on this guy this week, all right? Especially if I end up with Big Ben and cash, I think that Juju is going to bounce back in a major, major way. He was my wide receiver 1 coming into the season, and I think that that's still a possibility for him easily. We saw what John Ross and Tyler Boyd did to this team, and let me repeat that: what John Ross did to Seattle. Okay, Ross is a scrub, and I think that Juju is one of the great wide receivers in this league right now. He is going to dominate the Seattle secondary. 7,500. It's crazy underpriced. I really want to jump on that. Yeah, his game was not good, and he's dealing with this toe injury, so we'll have to see how that progresses. All signs seem to be that he is going to play. I'm still waiting on the Thursday injury report, so we'll find out. But, I think 8 targets, which he got in that blowout, loss to the Patriots, I think that could be a season low. And we already know, New England takes away the number 1 option. They do it very well, better than any team in the league. So, coming home where we know the Steelers are a better offensive team, I think that you just play Juju if he's playing, because he is going to smash. Keenan Allen, we talked about Mike Williams and, Hunter Henry being out and how that's a boost for Eckler. I think the same is true of Keenan Allen, 7,600. He will probably avoid Slay quite a bit. He'll go in the slot. Now, he'll face a fair amount of Slay. Slay will travel sometimes, but not all the time. So, I don't know. I think that he has a really high target floor. He had 10 targets in week 1. That could go up, to, I think, 12, 13, be in that same top tier range as, Thomas Hopkins, considering the injuries the Chargers suffered. But that being said, I don't know. I don't think that I can get there just because Juju's right there. I'm so high on Juju this week. I don't know. We'll find out. But I think that Juju at home is in a better spot against the Seattle defense than Keenan is on the road, traveling west to east to face the Lions in their building. So, that's really what that comes down to for me. But, I wouldn't scoff at anybody playing Keenan Allen. And I made a definitive choice here in these rankings tiers, to put Watkins below these two guys because they are all in that price range. Sammy Watkins is 7,200, and listen, Sammy Watkins broke the slate last week. If you didn't have him, you didn't win a GPP. 11 targets, 9 receptions, almost 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, put up 49.8 points on DraftKings. Absolutely unreal, and Tyreek Hill is gone, okay? At least for the next couple of weeks. So, yeah, Sammy Watkins, the wide receiver 1 in the best offense, 7,200. The more you talk about it, and then when you consider the injuries the Raiders are dealing with in their secondary, it's hard to think about fading Sammy Watkins. His upside is obviously slate breaking, but this is one of the things about week 2 that is really going to separate great DFS players from, other DFS players. And I think that it's going to be, being able to manage recency bias and being able to not get emotional about a small sample size or make bad decisions based on a small sample size. So, looking at Sammy Watkins, yep, he broke the slate, but is he going to do this 2 weeks in a row? I mean, we know Sammy Watkins is an inconsistent player. He always has been since coming into the NFL. He's been inconsistent. He has had these weeks where he looks like one of the best wide receivers that we've seen in the NFL, and then he has these weeks where he disappears. So, yes, I do think that he is in a great position to succeed here, but I think that there would be some significant leverage in just going up to Juju or Keenan in this spot, and maybe getting your exposure to the Chiefs' offense in the form of Travis Kelce, which we will talk about shortly, or, even me, Cole Hardman, not in cash for Hardman, but definitely in GPPs. I think that is the move. Sammy Watkins, he might kill me this week, but I do not think I'll be playing him. I, made it a point to put him below Juju in this tier, and I likely won't get him for that reason. Now, moving down to this next tier, I think it's going to be a little bit interesting. Cooper Kupp, 6K. I talked about him briefly when I was mentioning Jared Goff. PJ Williams, the slot corner for the Saints, I know he got injured at the end of the game. I do need to find out if he's, dealing with a serious injury or not. But Cooper Kupp, to me, is in a great spot. The Saints just love to give up points to slot wide receivers. Kupp had 10 targets in his first game back. He didn't really do too much production-wise with those targets. But, 7 catches, 46 yards, no touchdowns, only 11 points. But I really do think that he has a ton of upside if he's going to get 10 targets in a, what should be a higher scoring game. Coming home against the Saints, like I said, PJ Williams, Cooper Kupp, I think, is a player to target. Good friend of mine and podcast co-host, Joey Carrion, great guy. He is really high on Robert Woods this week, who got more targets. But Woods, he struggled against the Saints. If you look at the NFC Championship, he only had, I think, 6 receptions for under 50 yards, and that was without Cooper Kupp. I'm not saying that that's necessarily predictive. Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, Kupp, these guys are all in play. But for me, I'm never going to pay up for the highest priced Rams wide receiver. I'm just not going to do it. I think that there's always leverage in just taking Brandon Cooks, because he has that type of deep threat ability that makes him, have an incredibly high ceiling. And B, just take the guy who's the lowest price, because these guys all have high ceilings and they all have decent floors. But if Cooper Kupp's getting 10 targets, at 6K, I'm going to be looking at that, especially, like I said, PJ Williams. I've said it like 3 times now. It's something to look at. John Brown, 5,200. This kind of goes back to my love of Allen, and, John Brown is the real deal. He has basically been, talked about this way all throughout, camp. He was a great player with the Ravens when Joe Flacco was there, kind of disappeared. I'd be interested to, kind of see what Brown would look like with this new and improved Lamar Jackson. We saw him, striking bombs to Hollywood Brown. I don't know why that aspect of the offense disappeared last year, because it kind of made Brown irrelevant. But it kind of helped, the Bills get him at a pretty good price because I think John Brown is a very underrated player for how talented he is. 5,200, and I mean, he had 10 targets last week. I think that, there's a pretty good reason to think that 10 targets could be the norm for Brown. Allen loves to throw deep. Like I said, the intermediate accuracy, not necessarily there, but the deep threat ability of John Brown and his arm is there every play, and that's kind of what John Brown specializes in terms of being a deep threat wide receiver. So, I mean, yeah, seven receptions, 123 yards, and a touchdown against that terrible Jets secondary last week. And now he's going up against a team that allowed 200-yard receivers to Michael Gallup, who was eating deep all day, and then Amari Cooper as well. 5,200 and that kind of target share. That kind of deep threat ability. I do think that John Brown is an interesting floor ceiling combo at his price range, and I don't think that a lot of people are necessarily on this one yet. So we'll see. He is in my dummy lineup right now. I will say that. We'll see if I move off of him. DK Metcalf, 4,300, the last guy that I'm considering for cash at 4,300. Now, this would not be instead of Tyrell Williams. It would be in addition to, if I really want to fit two guys like Kamara and Hopkins or Kamara and Kelsey, that kind of thing. Metcalf, he was, second in targets on the team behind Chris Carson. He out-targeted Tyler Lockett. Now Lockett is dealing with a back issue, missed Wednesday practice, still looking to find out how Lockett looks Thursday. But I mean, if DK Metcalf is the locked-in wide receiver one for the Seattle team that I expect to be forced to pass the ball when, the Steelers are putting up points, I think Metcalf is interesting. I mean, he could realistically see 10 targets, and he's an athletic freak. So, still kind of a raw player. But at 4,300, I think that, especially if Lockett misses, he is in consideration. Only if Lockett misses. I would not play him otherwise. Let's move on to tight end here. My shortest player pool of any position. There's three guys on the list. I'll take a quick victory lap here. Evan Ingram was my clear-cut tight end one last week in a tier of his own, and, he smashed. And guess what? We're running it back in week 2. Evan Ingram. I really don't know what DraftKings was thinking to really only price him up 400 after, having 14 targets, 11 receptions, 116 yards and a touchdown. Sort of a larger point, I think it might have to do with their pricing algorithm. We saw this last year with Eric Ebron, who was getting an insane amount of targets in that Colts offense, and it took them forever to price him up. And Ebron was just a screaming value for cash games for a solid 3 or 4 week period last week. And I think that right now, Evan Ingram is in that same boat. I think that eventually, he will be in that, Kittle tier in terms of pricing, Kittle and Ertz. And right now, you have a $1,600 discount to go down from Kittle to Ingram. It's absolutely bonkers. And Kelsey, my second tier guy, I think Kelsey's the best play on the slate at tight end. But, I mean, that 2,100 makes a huge difference. And I don't see Evan Ingram getting less than 10 targets. I just don't. Evan Ingram at 5,200. I mean, if his name was George Kittle at 5,200, you would lock him in. I get it. Evan Ingram is, doesn't have that name value yet, but I mean, I can't believe that he is so underpriced. I look at him as an elite player, and I think that he is going to smash. So honestly, until he is over 6K, I think that he'll be my number one tight end every single week. I'm locking him in, especially if Sterling Shepard. I don't think that Sterling Shepard out necessarily, is a great thing because it'll mean the offense is worse, but I think it'll just mean the targets are going to be even more consolidated between Ingram and Barkley. So, Ingram, we saw his ceiling last week, and I think that, he could honestly hit that right back in week 2. So Ingram is my top play. Travis Kelce, an elite play as well. He didn't have a great week 1 in terms of production, 8 targets, 3 receptions. I mean, still 3 for 88 is not bad, of course. And he didn't get the touchdown, which hurt. He was clearly open for that one. Mahomes talked about it. He talked about it. But, without Tyreek Hill, I think that, it's plausible to see Mahomes lean a little bit more on Kelsey in this game. I think that he's a pretty safe bet to get about 20 points on DK. If it weren't for Evan Ingram being severely mispriced, underpriced, I would be probably trying to get up to Kelsey in cash, but I think that Ingram is still the move. Would not fault you for going Kelsey, though. I really wouldn't. Never could. Kelsey is such a smash play in cash games on DraftKings. And lastly, Darren Waller is a pay down option depending on your build at 3,300. Waller, this is one of those things where I don't want to get too sucked into recency bias, but I mean, Waller, he played 100% of snaps. He got talked up by Gruden after the game. He had an over 30% target share and 8 targets in a game that the the Raiders were squarely ahead in. 8 targets in that game. So what's going to happen when they're behind the whole game in this Chiefs game? Is he going to get 10 targets at 3,300? I think he's in consideration just for that. Again, Evan Ingram makes it really hard for me to consider any of these guys because he seems like such a lock to me. But yes, I do think that it gives you some real, flexibility with your lineup if you do go down to 3,300 at your tight end spot with Waller. So yeah, Kelsey pay up, Waller pay down, Ingram is the smash spot at 5,200. Lock him in. And I will close out the video right here with DST. We've got about 5 guys here, or five teams that I'm considering right off the bat. This, again, is really just going to sort of come down to the rest of your lineup and the construction. I would not be paying this week to sort of fit any of these elite defenses in. It's really just, what can you fit with what you have left on your team after you build your core, right? So the Texans, I think, is my favorite defense, just, in terms of price and upside. They struggled. J.J. Watt did not look incredible. He didn't look like the player that we know he is in that Saints game, but now he's going to be home against Gardner Minshew. I'm all about that. I think that if you have 2,800 left on your roster, just plug the Texans in and feel good about it. The next year, the Bengals at home against Jimmy G, 2,600. I don't think that Jimmy Garoppolo is a good player, so that's really what that comes down to. There's always going to be upside, and I like the Bengals at home in that spot. Correlates well with Gio, so if Mixon misses, could just sort of lock that in. And that $200 discount has been prevalent for me in these early build. Same thing, if you need to go down even lower, I would consider the Steelers there, 2,400. Yes, I do think the Seahawks are going to be pretty decent on offense, but I'm not so much worried about points scored as I am about sack rate, and Seahawks offensive line, not good. We didn't see too much from the pass rush of the Steelers against the Patriots, but I do expect TJ Watt and the rest of their pass rush to sort of turn up. In this home spot. Absolutely, I do think that they're going to bounce back, and not afraid to play them. Home defense, 2,400. We saw a lot of the sharp players just punt on defense last week, 2,200 for the 49ers, and I think that might be the move. So, you just attack a bad offensive line with what we think is a good pass rush. We'll see if it was just sort of a bad week 1 for them. That is my guess. And then, this last tier, these 3 are pay up options, the Ravens and the Patriots. I just don't think there's enough salary to get there. But if you can, they're in great spots. Again, we know passing opportunity creates opportunity for the defense to score and have bigger plays. So the Ravens at 3,800 going up against the Cardinals, who are going to be passing a ton. I think that's a good spot. Patriots, 3,700 on the road against the Dolphins. This just goes to how bad the Dolphins are, and as we know, Patriots should smash this game. They're something like 20-point favorites almost, so I don't see the Patriots defense not putting up at least 10, 12 points, but 3,700 is a big ask this week, and 2,300 for the Redskins. They are the cheapest home defense that I would consider if you somehow can't get up to that 2,400 Steelers play, which I think is a little bit safer. Redskins, yeah, it's not really great, but they are home against a division team. I would consider them, like, if I just need to punt and pray that they don't give me a 0. But that being said, managed 165 with a 0 from the Browns at 3,400 last week. 1 point would be a great improvement for my defense this week. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's really it as far as my tiers, guys. Thank you for watching. If you stuck through the whole way, I hope that you found some of this information actionable. And once again, you can follow me on Twitter. It's in the lower corner there. And check back Sunday morning around 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. I will post an updated, adjusted version of these tiers that sort of accompanies all the information that we get from this point on. Thanks for watching, guys, and let's sail to the money this week, all right? Let's have another good week. Thanks.